This video includes a discussion of serious crimes, which may be disturbing for some viewers, so I wanted to let you know that up front. But I think it's necessary to talk about these crimes in some detail for reasons that will become apparent.
1970年代半ば、カリフォルニア州の小さな町バイスエリアで一人の犯罪者が動き出しました。最初はいくつかの家に侵入して現金や宝石を盗んでいたんです。そのため彼はバイスエリアの嵐屋と呼ばれるようになりましたが、これはまだ序章に過ぎませんでした。
6 months later, in 1976, he moves up to Sacramento, and over the course of the next 3 years is moving all across Northern California, committing numerous sexual assaults, over 50 sexual assaults.
彼はイーストエリアの強姦魔と呼ばれていました。
The police are saying lock up tight. Sacramento's infamous East Area rapist may still be in town.
And then in 1979, he moves down to Southern California, starting in Santa Barbara, and starts killing. And he was known as the original Night Stalker in Southern California.
イーストエリアの強姦魔やオリジナルナイトストーカーとして知られるこの犯罪者は、1976年から1986年にかけて残虐かつ綿密に計画された数々の犯罪を重ねました。
Police believed that all of these crimes were committed by the same person, now known as the Golden State Killer. How was it known that these were committed by the same person?
Investigators were relying on MO. MO, modus operandi, is basically how a criminal will commit a crime.
He was wearing some type of a mask or a hood. He was wearing shorts and a t-shirt.
The Golden State Killer had a very distinctive MO.
What he would do is he would break into a house with a gun, a house with a man and a woman. He would tie them up, tell the man, I'm going to put plates on your back. If I hear those plates move, I'm going to kill your wife and then kill you. Take the wife into another room and sexually assault her. Then he would go through the house for however much time, eating, stealing stuff, stealing little things or whatever, and then he would leave.
How was he not caught based on fingerprint evidence?
Well, he didn't leave his fingerprints. He always wore a mask. He always had gloves on. This was an offender that did everything to prevent himself from being caught.
ゴールデンステートキラーは州内で19件の殺人、50件の強盗、そして多くの窃盗を重ねました。
Derek, how's it going?
How you doing?
Good, good. So we supply DNA sequencing solutions to the forensic laboratories that process crime scene DNA. At a crime scene, there's typically less than a nanogram of DNA left, and it's usually degraded. Right, so it breaks down. DNA.
Why is there so little at a crime scene? A nanogram?
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes.
There's no accident that he stops in 1986. 1986 is when the first DNA case of a murder case is actually solved with DNA. And I think he's following that, and he's saying, you know what I'm doing here, I'm leaving my DNA. I can't do this anymore.
ポール・ホールズ捜査官は何十年も彼を追い続けていました。
He couldn't account for DNA technology, and that really was his big mistake. That was the critical mistake. He left his DNA all over California. And it turns out that 3 of the cases, I had 3 sexual assault kits, and that's where I got the Golden State Killer's DNA from Northern California.
しかし、犯人の DNA が分かってもそれだけじゃダメなんです。誰のものかちゃんと特定しないといけません。1990年、FBI で国家の遺伝子データベースの作成を始めました。このデータベースには有罪判決を受けた犯罪者と関連のある人物の DNA が登録されています。このシステムはコンバインド DNA インデックスシステム、略してコーディスと呼ばれています。すべての人の細胞には23対の染色体が含まれています。片方はお母さんから、もう片方はお父さんから受け継いでいます。そして一部染色体の特定の場所には同じ配列が何度も繰り返されている部分があるんです。AATG、AATG、AATG、このような感じです。これを単差反復配列といい、英語ではショートタンデムリピーツ、略して STR と呼ばれており、人によってこの繰り返しの数が違ってきます。法医学研究所ではこの STR の繰り返しの数をすべて数えてプロファイルを作ります。当初は STR 領域が13箇所だけでしたが、2017年には20箇所に拡大しました。
It feels to me like that's not that much information.
It isn't.
しかし、 2人が全ての位置で繰り返される回数が同じ確率はすごく低いんです。コーディスデータベースには今や1800万以上の STR プロファイルが登録されています。
Golden State Killer's DNA profile has been up at the national DNA database that's run by the FBI called CODIS since 2001 and has been searching ever since with no hits. We did Interpol searching, trying to search other countries' DNA databases, thinking, well, maybe it came from out of the country. That's why, after all this time, we have yet to be able to identify him. And obviously, we didn't get any hits.
DNA シーケンシングソリューションはどんどん進化していきました。ヒトゲノム計画が完了したのです。1986年から科学者たちはヒトゲノムに含まれる30億の塩基対をマッピングし、シーケンシングしてきました。その後、民間企業が遺伝子検査を始め、コーディスデータベースよりも多くのデータを提供するようになりました。次は、テキサスのヒューストンにあるファミリーツリー DNA の本部を訪ねてみましょ
う。We'll go in the lab and we'll start talking about the life cycle of a sample. There you go.
Thank you. These samples, what are they?
So they're cheek cells. They just scrape the inside of their cheek, they put a cap on, and they send it back to us.
It's like a robot ballet.
Yes. So for DNA extraction, we need to remove all of the protections that are on the DNA and just separate it by itself so we can do testing on that.
普通は DNA の20箇所を見るところをこのテストでは70万から80万箇所も調べるんです。
The Family Finder test is based on what's called a microarray. And this is what a microarray looks like. Each one of those boxes is an individual. We can fit 24 individuals on here. And within that box is about 710,000 positions of your DNA that we're measuring, we're getting data for.
710,000.
Yes, and they're called SNPs.
So hang on, that's like 710,000 individual bases, like ATGC.
Yes.
For each person, you can measure 24 on that single chip.
Correct.
ヒトゲノムは30億もの塩基からできています。そして、すべての人間の DNA は 99.9% 同じなんです。つまり、個人ごとに違うのは約300万の塩基だけなんですよね。これらの異なる塩基は一塩基多形、略してSNPと呼ばれます。
So on there, are there a whole bunch of like little pieces of DNA then?
Yes. So what we have is a short piece of DNA that is specific to one SNP. So it's one position in the genome where we know there can be a difference.
Okay.
Is there any example of a simple SNP that, confers some sort of...
Actually, blue eyes is a single base change.
Really?
Yeah.
So everyone with blue eyes has this one letter change.
Mm-hmm.
You can see now it's starting to scan the first box.
The results of your 710,000 SNPs can tell you about your geographic ancestry or possible medical conditions, but they can also quantify how related you are to someone else. The genetics of having a kid are a bit like cutting two decks of cards together. The resulting deck will share about half its cards with each parent, and there will be long sequences of cards which match identically sequences in each parent. Now, if this deck has a kid, well then its offspring will share only about a quarter of its cards with each grandparent, and the sections of identical cards will be shorter.
これが DNA の仕組みなんです。より近い関係の人ほど多くの DNA を共有しており、同じ DNA の長さも長くなります。しかし、2人の DNA を比較するとき、全部を見る必要はないんです。SNP はだいたい2000個の塩基ごとに1つ存在しており、もし連続するSNPが同じである場合、その間の塩基も同じということがわかります。つまり DNA の中にあるたくさんのSNPを使ってどこからどこまで同じ塩基配列なのか、どれくらい似ているのかがわかるというわけです。
Everywhere that is highlighted in blue is where I share DNA.
With your father?
With my father. which is exactly what you expect, because I should share DNA with him everywhere because he gave me 50% of my DNA. So this is a second to third cousin. I have no idea who this person is. And you can see here, we are definitely not as closely related as me and my dad, because where the blue is, those are the only regions of the chromosome where we share DNA.
We all know that these genetic tests can help identify our relatives. But the question is, can you do the same thing with law enforcement databases?
Can you identify family members using the CODIS database?
You can, and it's only limited to really first order and second order relatives.
That means if I'm looking for the Golden State Killer, I'm looking for either his father, his brother, or his son. We did that over and over and over again with no hits.
Why is it so limited?
Because you've only got 23 loci. If you want to do proper kinship analysis, you need to have more points assessed on that genome to see how related you really are.
We know the answer is behind a locked door, and the answer is behind the locked door of 23andMe and Ancestry.com. We know that they have millions of profiles. Somebody related to him, a second cousin, I would guess, would be in there.
Sure.
And that was very hard to deal with, you know, that the answer is there behind this locked door.
Law enforcement is not allowed to search the databases of 23andMe and Ancestry.com, but luckily for investigators, there was another way. An independent website called GEDmatch had been set up to allow people to connect with relatives. You can upload the raw data from any of the big genetic testing companies and search for matches.
So when we initially search the GEDmatch database, our best hits come back at third cousins, which means they shared, you know, our top hit, I think, shared about 1% of the DNA. It's very little DNA that's shared. But that's a starting data point. And theoretically, by taking multiple of these individuals that share DNA and building their family trees using traditional genealogy and public source documents like census records and obituaries and newspaper articles and findagrave.com.
家系図を作ることでゴールデンステートキラーの親族を特定できるんです。すると、共通の曽祖父母の存在を示すポイントが浮かび上がってきます。理論的には、ゴールデンステートキラーはその曽祖父母の子孫というわけです。共通の祖先を見つけたら、その子孫を探していくだけです。1830年代の人たちには、一般的に15人くらい子供がいました。それぞれの子供を見つけて、その子孫をどんどん追っていくのです。まさに指数関数的に増えていく家系図です。
How wide did that tree get?
I think we had over 1,000 individuals in that family tree, but we knew a lot about our offender. We were confident he was born between 1940 and 1960. We knew he was a white male. We knew he was 5'8" to 5'10". You know, he's in California. He's up in Sacramento in 1976. He's in Southern California in the 80s. We basically narrowed it down to about 5 males, and then it's just investigations.
今年の春、容疑者を特定して、サクラメントのホビーロビーまで追跡し、車のドアハンドルから DNA サンプルを採取しました。数日後、犯罪現場に捨てられていたティッシュから採取した DNA サンプルと完全に一致したことが分かったのです。
Investigators in California say DNA evidence led them to one of the country's most notorious serial killers. Former police officer Joseph James D'Angelo was arrested yesterday, and he is believed to be the so-called Golden State Killer.
For 44 years, countless investigators have worked it and have failed to solve it. Within 4.5 months, a team of 6 were able to figure out who the Golden State Killer was, and that was Joseph D'Angelo.
After the Golden State Killer was identified, the floodgates opened. And we were seeing every week, not only single killers, but multiple killers, serial killers. Every week were being identified from cases in the 70s and 80s.
Because there's been over 70 cases now that they've solved this way, and they continue to solve them at a fairly regular rate. And I think...
Presumably that rate's just going to increase.
Yeah.
And there's going to be more because it's working, and we are going to, help find these people.
But the scary thing is, in the US, you have 100,000 cold case murders with DNA. You have more cold cases, but the ones with DNA is estimated about 100,000. There's roughly about 650,000 sexual assaults, cold cases with DNA.
This seems like a real paradigm shift.
It is. Multiple law enforcement agencies have said that this is the most revolutionary tool they've had since the adoption of the fingerprint.
With traditional DNA, it required getting a sample from the actual individual. It's a one-to-one type of process. And so these offenders who, let's say they have committed crimes and haven't been caught, and they're just living their life, and they're thinking, well, my DNA has never been taken from me. So I may have left DNA in the case that I committed back in 1975, but they've never gotten my DNA. They won't find me. But now, well, we don't have to rely upon that. Somebody distantly related to that offender has put their DNA into a database, and they have to start getting nervous because that's outside of their control. They can't account for a third cousin, what that third cousin is doing. And so they start getting nervous. And I've kind of wondered how many of these individuals recognize that law enforcement is eventually going to be knocking on their door as a result of a third cousin putting their DNA in the database.
一人の情報が登録されることで、その人の周囲にいる何百人もの情報まで映し出されるんです。それには親や兄弟、姉妹、叔父や叔母、いとこたちも含まれます。研究によると、イギリス人は平均で175人の7親等の親戚がいるそうです。しかし、それだけではありません。一人の DNA はまだ生まれていない数百人とも共有されていきます。それは息子や娘、孫、ひ孫、甥や姪、そしていとこまで含まれるのです。一人の DNA 情報は過去と未来を合わせて約1000人と共有されます。ですので、全員が自分の DNA 情報をアップロードする必要はないんです。2018年の研究では、130万人のデータだけでアメリカにいる 60% の人を特定できたのです。さらに、全人口の 2% の DNA 情報があれば、7親等や8親等の親戚を 99% 以上の確率で見つけられます。
DNA storage is one of the things that we have that is really unlike anything else. If you look inside, this is at minus 20 degrees Celsius.
That keeps the DNA good for a long time?
We have DNA samples in here that are probably about 15 years old.
How many samples are stored in there?
Just over 2 million.
Whoa!
Yeah. So the capacity is just over 2 million.
2 million people's DNA stored in this one small room.
Correct.
Wow.
2021年までに世界中で3000万人以上が遺伝子検査を受け、多くの人はアンセストリーや 23andMe で検査をしました。これらは警察とは無関係の会社です。しかし、ファミリーツリー DNA は少し違います。
If you ask Americans, should we have a national database where everyone's logged in it?
As their DNA.
Yeah, by their DNA and their name. Most Americans will be somewhat uncomfortable with that, or potentially very uncomfortable with that. But we're kind of sleepwalking into that scenario.
There are some people who are concerned with privacy. If anyone chooses or decides that they do not want their results to be used for law enforcement matching.
I do worry about genetic information being used to discriminate against someone.
My biggest thing is health insurance. I worry about if you have somebody's DNA profile and some law is enacted, it gets into the wrong hands, and they say that this person has a proclivity, they're headed towards Parkinson's, they're headed towards this, headed towards that, and then rates skyrocket. That's the biggest place that I see as a privacy concern.
Once your genetic information's out there, it's out there. It's not like a credit card where you can get a new one. Yeah, you're giving away something that you don't know what it can do.
Well, yeah, our information isn't ours in the first place. Like,
Right.
Our information is shared.
Yes, with your relatives.
Yes.
And although you may be adverse to this sort of thing, if they've already done it, in a way, you're out there.
In society today, you very clearly have two camps. There are those that are very comfortable having their genome available, to be able to be searched for law enforcement purposes, and there are others that are not comfortable at all. And that's okay.
The problem is, of course, those people who don't want theirs to be searchable could have their DNA uploaded inadvertently by their relatives. Do you know what I mean? So like if I don't want my DNA to be searchable by law enforcement, but my sister uploads hers,
Yes.
it's almost as good as me doing it myself.
Right now, Family Tree DNA's policy is we will only accept samples from law enforcement under certain circumstances. It has to be a sexual assault, identification of remains, DNA recovered from the scene of a homicide. And we also do child abductions. So if there's a child that's kidnapped and there's DNA evidence, we will process the DNA so they can try to find out who the abductor is. Those are the only cases that we will accept.
Got it.
Unfortunately, now GEDmatch has flipped off the switch. And GEDmatch has actually said that you're not allowed to have your information searched without opting in.
Right.
Was that decision by GEDmatch a direct result of this Golden State Killer case?
No, it wasn't.
No.
You want to tell the story?
You know, it had to do with a Utah case.
Where an elderly woman was playing the organ in a church.
And there was an individual who broke in and assaulted her.
But it wasn't a sexual assault, but it's a serious crime.
I tried to strangle her and left her for dead. I believe he thought that, she was obviously dead and left. The police, I believe, approached GEDmatch because that they were concerned that he was going to recommit other crimes.
しかし GED マッチの規約では警察の協力要請は強姦や殺人事件に限られています。
Her problem was that she didn't die.
Because if she died, then...
If she died, it would have fit the conditions, and they would have uploaded the sample because it met the terms of service and everything.
So what happened? They didn't? They didn't take that case?
They did.
They subsequently caught the individual from that search that they performed on GEDmatch.
But people within the genealogy world kind of got their passions inflamed, saying that is stepping outside of what this tool should be used for. And they ended up putting a lot of pressure on GEDmatch.
They flipped the switch because they got freaked out.
But at the end of the day, it was a violation of terms of service. And I think ultimately led to a good thing. Everybody got zeroed out, and then everybody gets to sign back in.
Subsequently, GEDmatch was sold to Verogen.
I can tell you, a new user today, when they sign up for GEDmatch, about 73% of them are signing up to allow law enforcement to search. We're pretty happy with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a high number.
It's a high number.
And it suggests that people want that, in a sense.
How many second cousins or third cousins do you know? You know what I mean? You don't know that many of them. Without even knowing it, you're helping justice. You're helping a victim's family get a little bit of peace. Not closure, but a little bit of peace.
To get an
Why
answer.
not?
Partly you could make an argument that if you want to be an activist helping catch criminals, one of the best things you can do is like encourage everyone you know to be tested and put in the database.
Correct. And, there are millions of people who have tested at other companies that are not working with law enforcement. And if they want to help, all they have to do is download their raw data and they can upload it for free into our database.
I absolutely believe in a person's right to privacy, but I also absolutely believe we have a right not to get murdered or sexually assaulted or be part, having violent crimes committed against us. There has to be an equal balance.
That scale of my privacy has been taken because of a third cousin has been identified versus a mother who's talking about her daughter has been murdered, that scale is way the hell like this.
We're at a point now where, in many ways, technology has kind of outstripped where the laws are. I truly believe that ultimately this tool and all the concerns with it will probably end up in front of the nation's Supreme Court, and there will be a decision. My bottom line message, if you're going to make a decision, if there's going to be laws restricting law enforcement to use it, make sure that you're making an informed decision and not assuming what it is based on its DNA and genetics and law enforcement, because it really isn't what you think it is.
I got to keep a couple million people happy so that I have access to the identities, kind of, in a sense.
In a sense, right?
Of millions, hundreds of millions of people.
Right. Right.
And that's a pretty selective sample. These are people who are willing to give up their information
yes.
to find their ancestors.
Yeah.
There may be many others who are militantly private, but they don't get a say in the decision of whether they're going to be searchable through that person or not.
True. That's the choice you make. So that to me...
That's the choice you don't make.
It's a choice you don't make, but it's also... It's the choice we have to make as a society is what's that balance? There is always going to be winners and losers in my mind, right? And I don't want to use losers in the negative sense there, but in a decision, at the end of the day, you have to balance, in my mind, the public safety with the public privacy.
Is DuckDuckGo, is that good?
I use it. I'm a little paranoid. So it's supposed to not track you as much, I guess. But yeah.
この動画が面白いと思ったら高評価とチャンネル登録もよろしくお願いいたします。